Welcome to Original Being, where we explore the timeless wisdom of ancient practices and old ways of living. From holistic health and wellness to survival techniques, homesteading, and primitive skills. I'm Jillian Erice, a functional and holistic-minded physician associate and a homesteading mother of 3. I am on a quest to reconnect with this knowledge our ancestors lived by, practical skills, natural healing, and self-sufficiency in a modern world. Each episode, I'll be sharing insights, experiences, and conversations with experts and everyday people who embody this mindset. Together, we'll challenge modern conveniences, embrace hands-on learning, and rediscover the practices that have stood the test of time. Disclaimer, the information shared on this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. My opinions and those of my guests are solely our own and are not affiliated with any institutions, employers, or certifications. This podcast does not provide medical advice, and any health-related decisions should be made in consultation with your personal healthcare provider. By listening, you acknowledge that you take full responsibility for your own choices and actions.
Today on Original Being, we have Stephanie Lay. She is a naturopath and teacher who helps you align your body, mind, and spirit with the rhythms of nature. Through Taoist face reading, yoga therapy, and Vedic astrology, she combines ancient wisdom with modern healing practices to support your transformation and deep healing. Grounded in the teachings of her grandmother, who first introduced her to herbal medicine and Taoist traditions, Stephanie guides you to reconnect with your true essence and live in harmony with life cycles. Hi, Stephanie.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I'm most excited to learn about how you first learned this stuff from your grandmother. I love, knowledge from our ancestors, and I loved my grandmother, the one I was most close with. So why don't we start there? Maybe your childhood, where you grew up and how you started learning these things.
Yeah, so with my grandma, it's actually funny. Over the last few years, I think I always had this story that I got into naturopathy and like holistic healing because of all the health issues that I experienced when I was younger. But I guess once you heal and you grow up, you kind of realize there was more to the story. And I kind of completely missed how much my grandma influenced me and just how much I had learnt from just being around her.
Yeah.
So we spent like a lot of our childhood with my grandma. And then there was a point where we kind of didn't see her for a while, but when we were kids, like she was always doing acupressure or like just taking really good care of herself. And she just really knew how to, I guess, eat seasonally and with herbs, and she would make tinctures and all this stuff. And with face reading, that kind of came like, I didn't realize how important face reading was in my life because I was just so used to it that I never really realized that it was a tool that I was using all the time. And like the way I learned through my grandma was just by being around her. And she would always look at people's faces, like if we were going on the train or something and she saw someone get on, she would kind of say, oh, like they've got these certain features and that could mean that they have these certain health issues. And then what you could kind of do to support that. And so yeah, I think I learned a lot just from being around her, and I didn't realize that she was actually trying to teach me because it just felt like she was, talking out loud. But now that I'm older, I realize, it was actually her way of kind of giving us this knowledge without it feeling very formal.
Yeah. It was just incorporated into everyday life. Oh, that's amazing. So Where did she learn the face reading from?
Oh, yeah. So that's actually a good question. I feel like I should ask her, but I do know like she spent like the first part of her career as a nurse. And so she was actually just always observing people. And yeah, to be honest, I need to really ask her like how that came about. But I know she did read a lot of books. She probably learned it from people around her as well. But it was really during that time when she was a nurse and she was seeing lots of like clients. And I think because they just saw so many people, this was also like during the war and stuff. So there was acute things, but also with chronic things, she would just really be able to pick up like certain features on someone's face and know like, okay, this is a really serious situation or just, like what they needed.
Yeah, I find that super interesting because obviously coming from a regular medical background myself, but being more holistic and wanting to incorporate those things, I bet that was really neat for her to have that knowledge of nursing, but then pull it in with this, more ancient practices.
Yeah, it's also quite, I wouldn't say common knowledge, but it's something that a lot of people kind of pick up on. I think it's kind of already, well, in Vietnam at least.
Hmm.
I know a lot of people who know bits and pieces of face reading, and and then I think there's some people, especially when they're more like into health, because that's kind of really where face reading kind of became very like established, or like they really developed it.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think because she was, being a nurse and like seeing lots of people, it was kind of a skill that she developed and practiced. But then I think just the people around her like would have helped shape that too.
So you were growing up in Australia? And was your grandmother there with you, or would you go visit her in Vietnam?
Oh no, she would spend half like the year in Vietnam and then half in Australia. So we spent a lot of time with her there.
Okay, awesome. So what were the health issues? I'm actually really curious because you mentioned this. This is a very common theme, actually, I've found on people I've interviewed on the podcast, is that a lot of people had sort of childhood health issues or health issues at some point in their life that modern or allopathic medicine didn't really seem to fully address. And then that's sort of what brought them to more holistic approaches or quote unquote alternative approaches to medicine. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So there was kind of like that period I was telling you about where I didn't get to see my grandma for a really long time. And that was really when I had a lot of health issues. And basically, it was like a mix of things, but it just felt really unmanageable. So growing up, I would like get nosebleeds all the time, and it would take me out of school and I'd just be bleeding for like an hour or so. And then as I got older, it was like, asthma and allergies, and I was covered in eczema and psoriasis. And then there was this point where I had a lot of digestive issues and like chest pains. And when I went to the doctor, they would like try and do blood tests and like, check my heart, and it kind of all came back fine. And then I wasn't getting my period for a few years. So it was like a lot of things that, now after studying naturopathy, I can kind of piece it all together. But at the time, it just felt like really scary. And like I just didn't know what was happening. I'd get really like faint and dizzy all of a sudden. And when I was like about 15 again, I started staying with my grandma again. And that really helped me because she just knew you didn't need to say anything. And at that time, when you have all these health issues, you do feel really depressed and like isolated. And so, yeah, I never really shared about what I was experiencing, like, or even the symptoms I was getting. But because she was so good at just observing like your skin tone, your face, or like your hands and all these things, like she just knew, oh, okay, I'm going to make you, there's like this Vietnamese dish, which is mugwort and eggs, like an omelet, but it was to help stimulate my period. And like she would cook all these different dishes, and she didn't tell me what it was for, like at that time. But she was just doing it in her own way and like trying to help me that way. So yeah, I feel like, yeah, I don't know. It's just funny to think back on those stories and like see how differently I see the past now.
Yeah. Oh, mugwort and eggs. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That must have been really bitter, huh?
It is. It's kind of gross. I mean, it's okay. You get used to it.
But I love that though. Like she's just feeding you these nourishing foods. She's like seeing what you need without being, I don't know. I don't know what the word is, but like, I feel like sometimes with my kids, if they're sick, I'm like, you have to take this, like it's more like pushy, I guess. And it's just nice to, see that it's just this nourishing grandmother energy. I love that. Yeah. So then you went on to study, I don't understand actually, because I think it's different in the States than where you are. You want to explain the degree that you got and how you got into that?
Yeah, so in Australia, to become a naturopath, you just do like an undergrad degree.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a Bachelor of Health Science, but in naturopathy.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a little bit different from what I understand about in the States. But yeah, I just went into that after high school, and I think it was like a really nice time. Like you were saying, lots of people who come on here have like their own health issues, and then as they like learn and study, they kind of heal. And yeah, I think that was like the same for me, like going through uni and like trying different things, learning about your health, but I would say traditional Chinese medicine and like getting acupuncture was what really shifted for me. I think with naturopathy, I had really good foundations to, understand nutrition and like what I needed to take. But in terms of like that shift and moving things, for me, traditional Chinese medicine was what really like helped.
Mm. So had you already healed before you went to the naturopathic program? Like, had you already healed that, and that was kind of what led you to that?
When I started, I was still like, my periods were kind of just starting to become a bit more regular again, and my skin was better, but I would still get kind of like patches of eczema or psoriasis on my body. Like it wasn't covering my whole body, but it was still, like still lingering. And I think in terms of like my emotions or my mental state, it was still kind of very delicate in a way. Like I hadn't fully healed.
Yeah. Did you learn more things in school that then helped you like move forward with that?
Yeah, I guess like you just learn so much. And the funny thing is, I feel like after studying, you get a lot more relaxed because you just have this knowledge of your body and you can be like, oh, actually, like if something happens, my body kind of knows how to handle it. Or like I have these tools that I know, like if something happens, I can take this herb or like do this thing. So it was just very empowering to have like studied about your health.
Yeah, then you had the knowledge that maybe you'd already been doing some of those things, but you didn't fully understand why, and you got that full. Yeah, that's really neat. So let's branch into all the stuff you're doing now. So what was the path after that? So you graduate from college with this degree, and then what happens next?
So I think after I finished uni, I felt like naturopathy was a really good foundation, but there were still things that I felt were missing or that it just didn't feel fully like myself. I kind of think healing is like an art as well. You kind of need to find your way of doing things or like your style. You need to learn the techniques and stuff at first, but then slowly you kind of need to draw in things that kind of make you or like make your style you. So I always loved astrology, and traditionally, there are so many like cultures that kind of incorporated healing with astrology and like understanding the cycles and like how that affects us. So, yeah, that was something that I was always really interested in. But before that, I got into Ryoho yoga, which is basically like Japanese yoga based on the meridians. And I had a really incredible teacher. His name was Andre. And yeah, he also had this amazing ability to just look at someone and know what was going on. I think that was the thing that I always found most fascinating with the teachers that I kind of got drawn to. They just had this really amazing skill of observing people. And yeah, he also practiced shiatsu, and he was kind of like one of the original people who brought macrobiotics to Australia. And yeah, like he could just see by the way that you were doing certain yoga poses, like what was going on for you internally. And, he also kind of reminded me about face reading because when I was studying with him, he did teach us a bit about face reading too. And that's when I kind of started thinking, oh, like actually I already had this information and I just never really thought about it again. But yeah, so I really liked how it was just very connected to your mind and your body. And I think it's really important to, do all the physical things, like get your nutrition and, your body, like at a certain state. But then if you don't address the emotional things that are going on for you, I just feel like that is a really important part of healing. And so that's kind of why I wanted to draw in like these different practices that I found like helpful for me. And I think, when you go through a lot of health issues, especially maybe like when you're young, you kind of need to find meaning from places. And I think, practices like yoga and like astrology can kind of bring that, I guess, yes, sense of like meaning to your life.
Mm. And what exactly is the Vedic astrology? How does it differ from the astrology that most people are familiar with?
So Vedic astrology and Western astrology, they still share a lot of similarities. Like the houses are the same, the signs are the same. There are a few different techniques. The thing that actually made the most like sense, or what drew me to Vedic astrology, was that they use the sidereal zodiac, which is basically what's actually happening in the sky. So with Western astrology, they're using the tropical zodiac, which is a fixed point. So the start of the zodiac is always Aries, on a certain date, and it's based on like the equinoxes. Whereas with Vedic astrology, it's more in alignment with if you're into astronomy and you look at the sky. So for example, today the moon is in Taurus. And if you get one of those kind of like apps where you can see the sky, you'll see that the moon's actually in Taurus. But in Western astrology, because they're using the tropical zodiac, when you look at the sky, the moon might be in Taurus, but on the kind of like chart calculator, it will say that it's in Gemini. So there's like almost like a 26-degree difference. So your sign will be slightly different. But then the meanings of like the signs and the houses are still pretty similar. And so basically with Western astrology and the tropical zodiac, it's kind of still based on what the sky was like a few hundred years ago. So that's like the main difference in terms of what I find really important. And so with Vedic astrology, in terms of predictions and stuff, it tends to be a bit more accurate.
I looked it up before our call today, and it said that I would be a Scorpio instead of a Sagittarius, which I was really upset about. Not that there's anything wrong with Scorpio, but I'm very identified with that because I'm December 11th, so I'm like in between. So do you find that people are like, what? Because it changes their sign because the dates are a little bit different?
Yeah, like it's funny how attached we can get to the sign that we think we are. And I guess at the end of the day, we've got all these signs in like different parts of our chart. So we do have like the influences anyway. But yeah, people do like feel sad when they realize they're one sign, and it like takes some time to kind of accept, but you have to look at everything else. So like, the other planets and, the houses they're in.
So yeah, but does that change someone's entire chart then? Because everything is a little bit off?
Yeah, so it will change. Like sometimes maybe your moon sign or like certain signs will stay the same. It'll just change in degree. But yeah, I mean, it will shift the whole chart, especially if you know your time of birth and you get your ascendant.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. So are you using this form of astrology medically somehow or for health things with people?
That's definitely where I'm kind of moving into, like trying to look at more charts, get more kind of case studies together so I can actually apply it. There's a lot of Western medical astrologers, and within Vedic astrology, like traditionally, most people will have, some knowledge of how it is used medically, but I am still looking for like teachers or like resources that are more detailed about medical astrology.
And how does that work exactly? Like, would it say if you have this in your chart, you're more prone to these diseases or these conditions, or is it something different than that?
Yeah, so there's certain houses in your chart that you need to look at that kind of are more reflective of your health, but also it kind of shows constitution, so tendencies that you might have. It doesn't mean you're going to get this disease at this time.
Right.
It'll just show like sensitive points or like things to be aware of and how you kind of support that.
Does that go for food? Like, how like in Ayurvedic medicine, there's the different constitutions too. Is it somehow connected with that?
Yeah, so it will all be really connected because traditionally with Ayurveda as well, like Vedic astrology was something that they used together to determine constitution, and the same with like Tibetan medicine and Tibetan astrology in China, TCM and their astrology. So it was always kind of meant to be used together, or to understand the influences of kind of what's happening in nature and in the sky.
That's so like a full picture. You know, we think of holistic health just being looking at diet and mind body stuff, but then to actually pull in the astrology as well is like really full picture for an individual. I bet I would love that. I would love to see for myself.
Because we have like certain transits and stuff, and then that can kind of activate certain things in your chart, which, you know, you would have had maybe tendencies for, but then until that time kind of comes, it might not appear in your life. And then also because you know when they're kind of coming, when to be mindful of it, or maybe to get certain checkups and things like that.
Interesting. What about herbalism? Is that tied in anywhere?
Yeah. So in the States, you guys have a lot of herbalists who kind of are bringing astrology together. And so, yeah, it definitely ties in because, you know, there are certain herbs that are related to certain planets and signs, so you can definitely kind of apply it.
Yeah, I'd be really interested in seeing that too. Or I know like on an episode recently, we were just talking about certain herbs for certain individuals, like maybe not even something you're ingesting, but just something spiritually you can work with, a certain plant. And I think that would be really interesting to say like astrologically, you're sort of aligned with this plant and this is something you should work with, or it could just be the most beneficial based on your constitution. That would be really fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. And like even with face reading, you know, within astrology itself, like when you look at the ascendant, certain signs have certain futures, and then in like Taoist face reading, it's still the same. So Taoism is really based on like living in alignment with nature. And so the key kind of like things within Taoism is like yin and yang, and then the 5 elements or the 5 phases. And when I first started learning about them, I would get really confused because I tried to translate elements to kind of like the 4 elements that we're familiar with more like but when I realized it's kind of like a misinterpretation, because it's really more about like a process, and they have a relationship rather than being like actual elements. Because, you know, like metal and wood, it just like was a bit confusing. But traditionally, you can look at it as relative to the cosmos. So the yin and yang refers to the sun and the moon, and that masculine, feminine. And then the 5 elements actually relate to the 5 classical planets. So I always like, you know, teaching people that in classes, because it just shifts your understanding of the 5 elements. And you kind of see that this kind of framework was a way to understand what was happening, I guess, like on a macro level and then on a micro level. And so within the face, certain features relate to different elements or phases, and in a sense also the planets.
So what are the planets? When you talk about that, what does that mean? The planets, like actually, yes,
the actual planets. So Venus is related to the metal element, and then Mars is fire. Wood is related to Jupiter.
I'm going to write this down as we're talking.
What am I missing? Okay, Saturn is related to the earth element, and I don't think I said Mercury, but Mercury is related to water.
Okay.
And
that's only, wait, I think I missed one. Venus, Mars, Saturn, Mercury. What was the other one?
Jupiter.
Oh, Jupiter. And what was Jupiter's element?
Wood.
Okay. Interesting. So wood, we don't really think of metal and wood. It's usually like earth, fire, air, water when we think of elements typically.
Yeah. That's why like it made no sense for me when I was trying to understand, because the direct translation of Wu Xing, which is, you know, 5 elements, is Wu is 5 and Xing is moving. So like a phase or a process. But traditionally, the planets were called moving stars. So, you know, you can kind of see that traditionally it was really quite esoteric and incorporated like this understanding of the planets and the stars. And, you know, over time, like Taoism kind of I wouldn't say lost its essence, but with Confucianism and, all these other influences and just over time, it's kind of, lost some of that.
So I guess let's go back to Taoism, besides just the face reading, which we're obviously going to get really into in a little bit. Taoism in general, I know you were just kind of explaining, but what does that mean? I mean, is this a thought process, a philosophy, a religion? Like, what actually is it? Because I feel like we hear this a lot, like it's used as a describing term for all these different things, but what truly is it?
I'd say it's more of a philosophy. There is now like a religious aspect to it that's kind of happened over time, but originally it was just this idea of living in alignment with nature. So they were observing nature and the sky and the stars and like understanding how that has an influence on our life. And I mean, it's like if you look at it or try and understand it, sometimes it feels like too much or there's a lot going on and it's a bit confusing. But in its essence, it's just really about being in harmony with nature.
Okay. Well, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
We can all get behind
that. And then
that.
like these other things like yin and yang and the 5 elements are just kind of a framework that they use in Taoism to understand like the relationship of, all these things.
So is this something that you've specifically studied aside from the face reading, or is this just the influence of this specific type of face reading?
So it came like, I really just grew up with it because it's just, like in Vietnam, when you're eating certain foods, they'll be like, oh, like don't eat too much of this fruit right now because it's too heating for your body. Or like eat this because it'll have this cooling effect or, so it was always kind of like embedded kind of culturally. And I guess I learned a lot from my grandma, but when I studied Ryoho yoga with my teacher, because the yoga therapy was all based on the 5 elements and like it was very much rooted in Taoism. That's probably where I started to get into it a lot deeper. And then as I kind of started to learn more deeply about the face reading, that's when I kind of really like started to put it together. And then astrology too. I think even though Vedic astrology is a very different framework, because it's still, at the end of the day, is talking about, the planets and the sky as well. It kind of, all like morphed.
Yeah, blended together. Well, let's go back for a little bit about the elements. So I know I was saying how most people, I guess in general, we just think of those elements being the earth, fire, air, water. So when we talk about metal and wood, what are we talking about there?
Okay, so with wood, the kind of quality of it is expansive, kind of like Jupiter. And so with plants, they always like grow upwards and outwards. And the organs that are associated with the wood element are the gallbladder and the liver. And one of like the really kind of cool things about the liver is, and like this kind of like expansive quality is, it really helps to give you like a sense of vision. It's also actually related to the eyes as well. But in terms of like your inner vision or like life path.
Okay. Inner vision.
And like this drive to kind of go out there and like, be motivated. And it has like a very assertive quality.
Interesting. And then what about metal?
Metal is related to Venus, and Venus is like the brightest planet or one of the brightest objects in our sky. And it has like a very kind of reflective quality, which metal has as well. Metal is probably the hardest element to understand. Its kind of symbol is the like traditional Chinese coin, which is a circle, and then it's got a square, like a hollow square inside. So it's kind of related to everything and nothing at the same time, but its quality is of refinement. And I was going to bring something in about face reading, but the organs are the lungs and large intestine. And it's about refinement because it transforms. And metal is most precious when it's been transformed. It's not like when you just dig it up from the ground. It's when you transform it into jewelry or, technology. And so, we do that when we're breathing, and, we turn oxygen and then we use it for like our whole body. And with the large intestine, it's like letting go of what isn't needed. So, when we go to the toilet and let go of all of that stuff. So it's like kind of about processing and refining things.
Wow. I love that. I love all these like interconnections between everything. So, I mean, I think everyone knows what fire, earth, and water are, but I don't know what the organs are. Why don't we say what the organs are associated with Mars and Saturn and Mercury?
So fire is the heart and the small intestine.
Okay.
And also the triple heater and pericardium, but that's kind of like related anyway. And then was it
Earth?
Earth?
Or
Okay,
water?
We'll
or water. You can do water next.
So earth is the stomach and the spleen. It's about nourishment.
Okay.
And then water is the kidneys and bladder. I just had a blank.
Okay. And I mean, that seems to make sense.
Yeah.
that deals with our fluids in our body. Wow, this is so interesting. Okay. So we have these elements, and then how does this go into the face reading?
Okay. So because all of our features are associated with certain elements. So, for example, with water, you look at the ears and the forehead. You can look at the hair as well, and also the chin. And then with the wood element, you can look at the eyebrows, like the sclera, especially in the eyes, so like the whites of the eyes, the jaw, and also the temples. And then with the metal element, you look at the skin, so like the skin tone, the color, the texture, and also the nose and cheekbones. And then for fire, fire is related to like the tips and like corners of your face. So like the corners of your eyes, the corners of your mouth. Fire, because it's, related to the heart element, and the heart is kind of connected to everything in our body. You see like fire touching in every aspect of your face. So wrinkles are also related to the fire element. And fire is connected to Shen, which is like your spirit. And so it has like an upward quality. So it's connected to, like the heavens, or like where our soul comes from. So it always wants to move up. So when someone has like very strong fire in their face, usually they can have like a bit of like a pointed kind of pixie-like face, but the corners of their face will kind of go up. So their eyes will come up. The corners of their mouth will always look like they're smiling even when they're not, because it's going upwards. Yeah.
Interesting. So, well, I'm going to let you kind of go. I know I'm kind of asking too many questions to specific. So I think like, how would you start with the face reading? What's your initial approach? So somebody comes to you for a face reading. Where do you start?
Well, the funny thing is I never actually just see people for face readings, even though people do want to. It's more something that I've just used as part of like my more naturopathic or like healing practice. And one of the reasons why I don't really offer face readings, although I did do it for a little bit and then I kind of like, kind of have doubts, mainly because the same thing with astrology. And I know not everyone feels this way, but with kind of the background that I come from with these practices, it's definitely more of like a Buddhist, I guess, understanding or idea. But because people put a lot of power to the words that you like speak in these kind of situations, like if you say, oh, like, you're going to always be unhappy in your relationships because of certain features in your face, like that's going to always weigh on them, even if they don't fully believe it. Like, it's always going to be at the back of their mind. And so traditionally, it wasn't always very good to be like psychics or astrologers or face readers, these kind of things, unless you had a very strong like spiritual practice, because in a sense, you take on people's karma in a way, because your words have so much weight and it can really change someone's like destiny. And I think we all have that power just in our day-to-day life with the words that we say, if we're going to hurt someone or we're going to like uplift someone. And so I always find like it's a lot of responsibility to kind of do that. And even with astrology, you know, traditionally it was more like monks and people who really like, same thing with like traditional Chinese medicine, they like lived and breathed Taoism, and they were doing their practices to keep the energy in alignment and like meditating so that they weren't projecting things onto other people. So I think maybe there'll be a time where I kind of like step back into that. But, you know, I have moments where I'm like, oh, am I really in a good place to be able to speak to someone, you know, about this? But when I'm just, you know, seeing someone for like health reasons and I'm not talking specifically about face reading, then I can just observe, okay, so these features are quite dominant in their face. So they'll have certain tendencies. And then from those tendencies, I can suggest like specific herbs that will be more suitable for them. For example, like bitter herbs are so popular for like digestion. But someone who already has like a very, I guess, you know, maybe red face, they have very strong fire features, like they're kind of overdoing it. If I gave them bitter herbs, it will just kind of exacerbate that. So maybe to support their digestion instead of bitter things, maybe they actually need something more soothing for their nervous system so they can actually digest. So it kind of just informs the way I practice, but I haven't, you know, just been doing face reading as a standalone.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting too, because, you know, we're talking a lot about these health things, but there's a lot more to face reading, like you were just saying, than just the health stuff. There's actually sort of like predictive future things or tendencies, like you were saying, which could be fascinating and really interesting. But just like astrology, sometimes people do take it too seriously or, like in a negative way. And I always think like, anything that doesn't hurt is great. Like you can take it or leave it, but not everybody is able to process information that way. So, I think it's really important that you've taken that responsibility, you know, to see that from a health standpoint, it's so cool though, to be able to bring this in. And I think I come from a dermatology background. So I love looking and assessing health based on that and people's faces. And also, I'm very observant and I'm very visual. So this was really like the perfect, practice of medicine for me. But I'm fascinated with the face reading for all of the health things and how it's connected to everything. But when I think about a lot of patients like acne, perioral dermatitis, rosacea, a lot of these skin conditions that are like just on the face for some people, it's really interesting because you think, well, this isn't happening in the rest of the body. So why is it just coming out in the face? And how is the face showing us what's happening internally? Have you worked with people where really they were having some of these particular skin conditions and use the face mapping to figure out the source of it for them?
Yeah, so I definitely have to do more like with skin, because a lot of the times if it's showing on your face, it is showing somewhere else in your body. Like maybe it's not an actual disease, but there's some kind of, you know, like weakness, because like rosacea is really red. So I would still be looking at, so the color red is related to the fire element. So where that might be showing up in their life. And I know there's a connection between rosacea and kind of like gut things. And so with the heart and small intestine, which are related to the fire element, like you kind of see that link as well. Or like, you know, the tip of the nose, or even the texture of the skin, like it's really dry. So that can be related to the metal element. And so they might actually also be one, like not absorbing enough like moisture through their food. So it could be like an earth element thing as well. Or it could just be that they're kind of deficient with either their lungs or their large intestine energy. So like I still kind of see it in terms of like the body rather than just, skin.
Yeah, because when I've looked at face mapping in the past, a lot of times it does have like certain areas that correlate with certain organs, but it's not bringing in this full picture like you're talking about with the elements as well. I have noticed something I found really fascinating is that a lot of my patients who have had acne only right here on the cheek, which is kind of an uncommon area for especially women to like only have acne here and not here, where we have hormone receptors around the chin area or the T-zone, which has more oil.
Yeah.
And they're always smokers. And isn't that the lung area?
Yes. And you'll also know, like, with cigarette smokers, they'll always have very dark lips. And one of the things that smokers always look like is quite thin because they're not absorbing their nutrients. And so it actually shows even in their lips, like that their digestion is weakened. And like dark is related to stagnation. So it kind of shows there as well. And I always give an example of, like, you see my dark spots, right? So in Asia, because a lot of people, dabble in face reading, they'll always tell me you have to get them removed. Like, it's bad to have those spots there. It's going to like affect your future and blah, blah, blah. But for me, like, because I am more, I guess, familiar with face reading in terms of health as well, they kind of appeared when I started getting really sick as a teenager. And it's very uncommon to get dark spots at such a young age. It's common to get them like with Asian women, but more so when they're in their 30s or 40s. And so over time, what I've noticed is that when I'm getting enough rest and sleep, and, taking care of my like diet and all these things, that they start to lighten. But the moment I stop taking care of myself, they become really dark. So it's like kind of a good way to monitor what's happening. And also like, within face reading, you get the kind of like map of the different ages and where they are on your face. And this one is kind of like around 37. So I know that around that age, I need to be a bit more mindful of my health, or like what's going on in my life. And also because it's like on the cheek, so it's kind of related to the lungs, and it's brownish, so kind of like the earth element. So like those kind of conditions. So I do know I do have a sensitivity to my lungs, so just to be mindful of that.
So even people's like moles and freckles and sunspots have meaning for their face reading.
Yeah, so they will. Not always for health, especially for their like moles that they've had for a really long time, but they kind of indicate things to do with, fate and that kind of stuff. So they do all have a meaning.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
My husband has a lot of different like random moles. Like it's so different because I don't. And I wonder what his mean. That's really interesting.
When people have a lot of freckles and moles, usually they are quite have, a bit more fire in them. That's a fire feature to have freckles and things as well. So if there's lots of them, like individually, they don't really mean heaps, but when they're very dark or like defined, then they'll have, certain meanings.
He has one that's like almost perfect equidistant to his eyes, like right here. And he thinks that's like really magical. Does that mean anything?
Yeah, I mean, it is. Yeah, like I've seen a few people who have that. So that area is called like seat of the stamp. And yeah, so it's also kind of connected to the third eye. So, if he taps into his intuition, I'm sure it'll be like, he'll get some interesting insights, but also like being mindful of like how he expresses his emotions, especially like anger. And if he's like, either, I guess just using it in a healthy way. Is he like suppressing it? Is he overusing it? Yeah.
That's really interesting. Well, I guess I'm also thinking about, when people are really sick, oftentimes we see that swelling in the face, like the puffiness, or certain features, and then it changes. But also with age, we do lose like volume in our face. And then we'll start to get like, I've noticed for myself, I've always had a little bit of a rounder face, and then I'm getting more like sharper features as I get older. So does that change? Like it can't change our path really, right? Because that's just part of like our natural progression of our face. So how are we reading the face just like age wise too?
It does, because we choose our life. So nothing's set in stone. We come in with certain like predispositions and influences, but at the end of the day, our faces do change. And there's like this kind of saying, it goes like, between 0 to 25 years of age, you have the face that nature gave you. Or like your mother, 25 to 50 is the face that you create. And by 50 onwards, that's the face that you deserve.
Wow.
Because it's a bit hard, but it's kind of saying it's like, the choices that you make and, the life experiences that you have. Like you can see even day to day, your face will kind of change. Like, when you have a bad day, even if, apart from like vibes, people can just see like in the color of your skin, in certain, things about your face that, everyone does face reading. We're just not really aware of it. We do it really subconsciously. And you can kind of see that in all parts of life, especially like in art and movies. Certain actors and actresses are always cast in certain roles and they always fit those features really well. And so when you learn about face reading and you see these principles, you're like, oh my gosh, like everyone's just doing it quite intuitively. But yeah, so yeah, faces do change. And of course, like, you can consider age, but at the end of the day, like you're still just reading the face and what it's showing when you're looking at someone. And I guess like even with relationships, you'll see like when a couple is very young, they look very different when they first get together. And then by the time they're like 70 or 80, their faces actually become, yeah, exactly. It's because with our faces, like we have so many muscles, we're actually always mimicking other people's features as well. So then you end up kind of like your face morphs into that. And also like diet and nutrition, all these things play a big part in your aging. And like just a few weeks ago, I was going to like the markets around here and this lady had some tape stuck on her face. And that's actually a good way to like, I guess, reduce lines and wrinkles, because what you're actually doing is it's not trying to stop your face from moving. It's actually making you aware of the thoughts you're thinking, the emotions you're feeling when you make certain facial features. So like when you go like that, you like kind of frown, you get these lines. And when they become really defined, it just shows that over a long period of time, you've been feeling or thinking a certain way.
So what are people doing when they do like Botox and stuff? Would that be like super frowned upon in Vietnam or just in this tradition because they're like altering what their
a lot
natural...
of people do that here these days too. But so there's, I guess, a few layers to that. At the end of the day, it's your face and your life. You can do whatever you want. But if you want to kind of live in alignment with more like Taoist philosophy, then there are a few things to consider. One thing is that there's this concept of having the original face, the face that you were born with, kind of like your purpose and like who you're meant to become and blossom into. And when you're doing external things, it can kind of like, I guess, the word's not coming to me, but it kind of inhibits it in a way. Maybe not drastically, but because the places where most people get Botox are kind of like the, around the eyes,
the forehead,
and especially the forehead, they kind of repress those emotions from being expressed. And so they kind of like dampen that channel. And the other thing is Botox is still like a toxin for your body to be processed. And it's connected to the liver, like these kind of like areas especially. So they're kind of like affecting the function of their liver as well. Maybe not even physically, it could just be more emotionally, but it's still kind of, blocking that energy from flowing nicely. And the other thing is, like I was saying, we mimic each other's faces a lot. When you get a lot of Botox and your face can't really move, it's actually hard for people to connect with you. Yeah. And like build a relationship, because we can't like tell if you're like really smiling or like, like when we're talking to each other now, we're like nodding and like reflecting back each other's like facial reactions. So that also is something to consider, that you can, kind of like block that as well. And again, it might not be in a really big drastic way, but it will have some influence.
Yeah. And it makes me think about, are there certain lines or, wrinkles that form that are actually desirable because they're showing certain positive things as time goes on?
Well, within face reading, there's nothing that's negative or positive. It's
Okay.
just, an observation um, about like what happens. And I think, all faces are really beautiful, especially once you kind of start to understand like certain meanings behind things. Um, like when someone is very lined and like heavily lined with wrinkles, it usually just means that they've been very expressive in their life. So like using a lot of fire element, but it's not always healthy to do that because you're actually draining a lot of your own inner energy or your jing, like your life essence. So you don't want to be doing that too much, but it just shows that, yeah, someone who's really expressive or likes to show people how they're feeling for better or for worse. And, certain lines mean different things. So like these kind of smile lines that we have here, they're connected to the colon. So you can, observe like the color and stuff, but and see how the function is for your large intestine. But it's also called like purpose lines. And so you really want to start having them developed by the time at least you're 50, because it helps you to feel like, again, with that meaning, like you have meaning, and that is what helps you to live longer, especially once you get to a certain age. And the reason that the colon is actually related to purpose is because I found this really like, when I first learned, I was like, oh, why does the colon relate to, having meaning and purpose in life? And one of the things is being able to sort out, what's for us and what isn't. Like to have mastery over something is to say no to a bunch of other things as well. And I think that's an important part of like knowing what your purpose is, because there are so many amazing things you can do, so many like causes to follow and support. But what's that thing that really connects for you? Yeah.
So
and
the
that's
colon,
what the colon helps you.
like releasing, like absorbing the nutrients you need and releasing what you don't need.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really cool. And I love that these are the purpose lines.
lines.
It's like the more you smile, the more your purpose is going to be defined.
Yeah.
So you need to be happy.
Yeah. And then like with the crow lines, or like the smile lines in your eyes, it's also kind of related to the spleen a little bit. So like the health around that, like sometimes people might be too giving or, and then they need to take care of themselves as well. Just like these lines, like, across the kind of like top of your nose, like between your eyebrows. That's also like related to the spleen and like nourishment. So are you taking care of your health? Are you eating well? And also people who have those lines tend to give a lot to others.
Yeah, see, it's really interesting because just from regular dermatology, we would think like crow's feet, for example, the little lines around the eyes. Like if I smile, like I have pretty like squinty eyes, but I don't really have any crow's feet. And so that kind of goes to what you're saying. Like that has to be something about people's faces and the way that their personal face and their musculature works, that even though I look like I should have crow's feet at this point, I don't.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And does crow's feet have a significant thing there?
Yeah. So, it's quite amazing because everyone will age quite differently, just depending on what they're used to doing with their faces and like the certain feelings, because we're all so different, So yeah, kind of what I was saying with the crow's feet is that it's also related to the spleen. So, and the spleen is kind of about like nourishment. It helps to, build your blood. And so if you've got like a lot of lines there, I'd be like kind of looking at that. And yeah, like you also have to look at all the other features. Like you can't really just go off on one and say, oh, this and this. You really have to be looking at the face as a whole.
Right, because everything's connected. Yeah.
Yeah. So like you can kind of say certain things about certain features, but at the end of the day, like you need to take it as a whole. Like even when you're looking at someone's face for constitution, you need to be looking at all the features that relate to that element. You can't just be like, oh, they've got very strong eyebrows, so that's, you can kind of like say, oh, that means they have a good wood energy, but you also need to look at the jaw and other parts too, and like the overall thing. Yeah.
So sometimes you're just looking at the features for the energies too with the elements. So you could look at the features and say, oh, this is good wood energy, but this is weak water energy or something. And then they need things to bring that up or to increase that.
Yeah.
To bring that balance.
Yeah. So you will kind of see that, like, people will have maybe 2 or 3 elements that are more dominant than others. And, you know, when you're healthy, like, it's okay. Like, things kind of are balanced in your way, like in your body, like what balance is for you will be different for someone else. So unless they've got, you know, certain symptoms or they're feeling, you know, unwell, like, yeah, you don't really need to say, like, prescribe things. But for example, if someone has very dominant, like, wood features, I would still suggest that they do things to support their wood element. So that could be like making sure they're being very physically active. People who have dominant wood, like, need to move and, like, do competitive things and, like, get that energy going. Because if you tell them to just rest at home, they'll just probably, like, get really bored and frustrated, and it's not going to, like, suit them and their constitution. Whereas someone who's very strong, like, water elements, like, you need to tell them, like, you have to rest, you need to lie down and not do anything. And that's what is really nourishing for them. Whereas someone who has, you know, a lot of earth in them, they need to be around community and people, whereas someone else might just be like, I just want to stay home and, like, read a book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like knowing what suits people, and, like, you know, we all need all of these things because we still have all the elements within us, but there are certain, like, you know, tendencies we have.
So that's interesting. It's almost the opposite of what I was saying. I was thinking, like, if it's a low one, you need to, like, bring it up with something, but you're saying also if it's dominant, it needs to be supported.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of need to look at the whole picture. So depending on what's going on for them. Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe they've got, like, their metal element is very deficient or something like that. And it's causing them certain symptoms, then you do need to nourish that. And you might not need to nourish it directly with things that are good for the metal element. You can do it. This is where you need to understand the 5 elements, because you can support it through, like, earth element kind of like therapies, because earth helps metal to kind of grow, like, it nourishes the metal element.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. There's so much to process, but I love this so much. I feel like I could talk to you forever.
Yeah, it's fun.
It is really fun. Well, all my friends were like, tell her to read your face, say something about your face. I don't know if people would find that really interesting. I know you can't do a full face reading, you know, in this moment, but, like, if you just look at someone, like, say you do, come on, are you able to just look and be like, oh, like, I already see just looking at you right now that you're XYZ or this, or that you have this health issue or you need this? I mean, is it that quick, or do you really need to, like, pause, like, pull your hair back, take a look at everything?
So generally you can, because, like, when you look at a face, it's different to looking like, you know, doing tongue diagnosis or pulse diagnosis. It's something that you can kind of just see, which is why I like it so much. And certain features will always stand out. And with your face, like, metal is definitely a very strong element for you. And then I'd say, like, liver. I mean, the wood element, but yeah, your liver too. Yeah, so wood and metal would be, like, the most dominant, because you've got very, like, prominent cheekbones. And you know how you were saying, like, as you've gotten older, like, you notice, like, you're getting more hollowing in your cheeks. It's also just, like, maybe certain features are becoming more dominant for you. So maybe you're stepping more into, like, that metal, those metal qualities. And like I was saying, so, like, refinement is a big thing. So you've got very clear skin. Your nose is very prominent as well. Like, very straight. And then you've got, like, very good, like, a very good jawline. So that's kind of connected to, like, that wood element.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, like,
so what does that mean for the liver? Like, is the liver good or is the liver bad then? Like,
no, it's good. I mean, so what can happen when people have strong wood is, you know, they tend to be quite healthy. But because, you know, they're used to having a lot of, like, I guess, like, that energy and fire, that they can overdo things. Yeah. So being mindful of that, I think, like, the metal element, you kind of, like, balances it out. But yeah, so, like, it makes sense that you're kind of, like, working in skin as well, because the metal element is so much about the skin. And, like, that's like another way to tell when someone is very strong metal element is that their skin is very like, I feel like refinement is just such a good word for it, like refined, almost like delicate but very clear. So when like your metal element is healthy, your skin will be very clear.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I do feel like that. Like, that's funny you said that about the face, like that my cheekbones are getting more prominent as I get older, and that's refining like my, almost like my purpose too. I do feel like that, you know, I'm trying to, even just like doing this podcast, like I'm trying to just like move away from allopathic medicine and like be my more authentic self. And it's taken a long time. I'm very, I don't want to say I'm not outgoing, but I am kind of introverted. I'm like an outgoing introvert.
Yeah.
Like I can be if I have to be, but I actually am very shy and like want to be like, oh, don't look at me. So I am pushing myself out of my comfort zone, and things are starting to come together, you know, like that. Like I feel like I'm moving more towards my purpose. So I wonder if that is going to be reflected in my face.
Yeah, it will. And like, it will just like, even in like the tone of your skin and like all these little things, like you just, you know, when you see someone who's happy, even if they're not smiling, they have a bit of a glow. Like the glow is a real thing, especially like in face reading. It's like you need to notice the glow, like even within the eyes, like the eyes are reflecting every kind of like thought and emotion we have. Like even if we don't first reflect it in our face, like just in the light, and like skilled face readers, like that's almost all they need to be able to like tell so much just by like the gaze and, you know. But it's really good that you're kind of feeling like you're more on your purpose. Like one thing with the metal element is you're really good at kind of like finding what's important and then kind of like filtering that out and then sharing, which is great. Like if you're doing a podcast or these things, because then you can really, like draw out the really important things. And then you've got, you know, like that really strong jaw. So you have a lot of energy to kind of like go for it, and it can make you a bit stubborn, but that's a good thing because the jaw is kind of like so the eyebrows are kind of called the leaves of the tree, and then the jaw is like the root of the tree. So when you have like a strong root, you can be really grounded. You can like, you have good energy because you're kind of, you know, grounded and connected in that way. So yeah.
I love
that you feel that way.
So let's go back, because I know you wanted to talk about this too. You're talking about the microcosm and the macrocosm. What are we talking about there, and how is this related?
Yeah, so it's kind of just, you know, even within our face. So on like a more macro level, you can see the different organs and the different parts of the body. If you want to look at it from the sense of the chakras as well, you can kind of say that the top of the forehead is related to the crown. This is like related to the third eye, the place in between your eyebrows, and then like, you know, so on until you get to the chin, which is like the root chakra. So you kind of see that whole kind of system within the face, but then even within your lips, different parts reflect certain organs. And then, you know, like when you look at the tongue, you can see like the whole body in the tongue as well. Or like in the foot, when you look at reflexology maps, you can see the whole body within the foot. So it's always like everything is relative to each other. And, you know, we have the 5 elements or the 5 phases within our body, and then also yin and yang, and that's like the sky and, you know, the planets and the sun and moon. So everything is just, relative to each other. And in like one of the ways to write the script for medicine in, you know, Chinese, is with the lower half. There are kind of like 2 ways to write it. And one way is kind of very similar to the word sorcery. And so that really connects it to Taoism as well, and like this more cosmic, esoteric way of viewing the world. And in like the origins of Chinese script, like book, they have for sorcery the image of 2 women dancing around a fire. So even within that like traditional context, medicine was always really connected to like this very holistic way of seeing the world.
Oh, I love that. I actually listened to the podcast episode that you put out, and It was amazing. I love ancient mythology and all of the connections. And I just thought you did such a good job. And it was so beautiful how everything was incorporated. But that just made me think of that when you said it was like sorcery. And so I'm sorry, I know I got off a little tangent there, but, and so, well, coming back, so what you're talking about, what's that microcosm, macrocosm? Are we talking about, you're saying things on a small level are related to the whole? So like the tongue and the foot is the microcosm, but it's showing you the whole body as the macrocosm?
Yeah. Yeah, it's, I guess, just that sense that we're all connected, really, to what's happening to the earth is what's happening in our bodies. You kind of see that, like, as it heats up, we have so much inflammation and those kind of issues. And what's happening in the sky, like, you know, in terms of astrology and transits and all of these things, like we start to have certain experiences as well. And so, yeah, I guess it's just speaking to that relationship that, you know, just exists within all of us and just how deeply connected we are, even if sometimes we feel really alone.
Yeah. I don't know if did you ever read the book Inflamed? It's called Inflamed. Oh, so it was written by a doctor, but it's basically talking about that too, about all of the things happening like on our planet being related back to also like the physical bodies and the health issues of today and like how it's all interconnected. And it's very, very fascinating and sad in a lot of ways too, because there's just so many harms being done to our planet that, you know, it's sad to see that, but then you do see the connection in humanity as well.
Yeah. We've become very like wood oriented, like always action oriented, go, 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 like never stop, you know, caffeinated all the time.
Yeah.
And like, it's very like, kind of like the qualities of water have been kind of ignored because, you know, one of the big things for like to nourish the water element is to rest, and rest doesn't mean like sleeping. It just literally means lying down so like your kidneys can be relaxed and just like letting things happen. And yeah, it's like, it's interesting how, you know, you can see that within our own bodies and the influence of the elements, but on a more broader scale, you see the same kind of things happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying that so much in my life. Like I think you had kind of said, you could see from my face, I am very fast paced. I have a lot of ideas. I try to do way too much. I kind of burn myself out, and I'm trying so hard to like slow down, notice things. And you do, when you take the time to rest and to pause, you notice things you didn't notice before, and you appreciate small things that you weren't able to appreciate when you were just go, 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 go. It really is a whole mindset shift to do that.
And it's okay for you because it's kind of like something you're naturally gifted with, to have that energy and like that drive, but not everyone has that. And I feel like it's hard when you don't kind of fit in that kind of specific mold at the moment, at least. It might change again, like the trends change all the time. You know, like even with like certain surgeries, I find that so interesting to see what people do and like the kind of qualities they're trying to express through it. Like, you know, even with eyebrows, like, because I was saying it's related to anger and assertion, that stuff. And for so long, the trend for women was to pluck them completely thin.
So
and
thin.
Kind of
that was when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Like so thin.
And it's like, you know, indirectly trying to create that sense of like removing that ability to be assertive or like express your anger. And then now like more thicker natural brows are kind of, you know, coming back into trend. So yeah, it's interesting to see how like everything is kind of connected.
That is really interesting. So like the trends in cosmetic facial trends could actually be expressing a bigger thing for society.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds really intense and official when you say it that way, like rather than just, like, it's just like this observation I had. Yeah, but like even like the lips,
yeah,
you know,
really
having very full lips.
Yeah.
The lips are really, you know, connected to sensuality. Even if you don't have any face reading understanding, you know that, like we will pick up on that. But it's related to the earth element, which is like about connection and like this ability to enjoy food and like by getting your lips filled up, I think that's like the idea that you're trying to communicate as well, in a sense, whether or not you realize it.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting. I know. I wonder how the trends are going to keep changing as time goes on. Well, it's also an interesting factor. Like if people are changing their appearance, but I wonder if sometimes like we kind of always think of it as like a negative thing, right? Like I know you were saying like everyone can do what they want to do, but I think like the general consensus is like, oh no, why is everyone altering their faces and everything? But maybe for some people that is beneficial. You know, what if it's like they had really, really thin lips and they needed to express something more and they got lip filler, but then it only filled them to like a quote unquote normal amount, or like not like, and that helped change something for them. And then they were able to express themselves more. I don't know. Like that's another like interesting thought for it.
Yeah. Like, people always ask, like, if you get surgery, like plastic surgery, does it kind of change your fate or, that kind of thing? And like some people in like the face reading world would say that it can, but I don't think it really changes it that much. Like I think maybe more in an external, superficial way. Like it might change how people react to you.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, like the idea behind face reading is really like it's more about what's happening internally. Like how are you feeling? What are you trying to express? Or like, yeah. So I think it's really important to like consider that. So like if you're, wanting to feel more sensual and for you, like you think, okay, I'll like do something to my lips and that helps, that's good. But you need to make sure you're tapping into that energy in other ways in your life. Like maybe you're getting yourself some really nice fibers to wear and then you just feel like that on your skin, or like you're bringing flowers into your home. Like you need to actually live it. Like it can't just be something superficial for other people. Like you need to do it for yourself. And I think that's really important. Like if you're doing any kind of surgery, like know why you want to do it, and don't let it be coming from a place of like lacking, but rather like, oh, like I want to embrace these qualities and like do it in other ways too, because there are so many ways to, kind of like feel sensual or, if you want to develop more wood energy, to go be active and do these things as well. So it's like you can bring in all these qualities or like whatever you desire, but like it needs to be maybe a bit more holistic than like
absolutely.
changing your face.
And that makes sense. And I think that comes down to the bottom line that if we didn't have social media and so much, projecting on us all the time, we wouldn't necessarily even want some of these altering procedures. So I kind of like that aspect of the face reading as you were talking. It just makes me think like, oh, I can have a new appreciation for my face or features that maybe I'm not happy with because I've just wanted to change them or I just don't like it, how it looks. But then to look at it from this whole other perspective of like, this is like my personality and my fate and my health, and look at it that way, it gives you a new appreciation for your face.
Yeah. And like your face will change over time to kind of like match how you're feeling and, experiencing life. But, I've heard of people who had like done surgery to their ears because they stick out. But like in terms of face reading, it kind of shows like someone who thinks a bit differently, who could be like a leader or, they literally stick out. So like those are really like special qualities to have, but then maybe as kids they get made fun of or, all these things. So it's really like important to, I guess, like understand more about your face, and then you can just, like you said, appreciate it more.
Yeah. I love that. Well, there's only one more thing I want to ask you, but then again, of course, you can cover anything else if you have other stuff you want to talk about. What about asymmetry? Because, and then this is just talking about me too, but I've noticed I have quite a bit of asymmetry and it's getting worse as I've gotten older, and it's kind of like really disturbing me, but I'm also like, I wonder what that means. Like, why is there like a strong asymmetry on one side of my face?
Okay. So, that's like one of the first things I will often talk about, which is like yin and yang. So looking at your face from the left and the right side. You can also look at yin and yang as like the top half of your face and the lower, but I usually like to look at it as left and right. And so the left side reflects more your inner world, how you are when you're just around people that you're very close with or when you're just by yourself. And then the right side is more like your public mask. And so a lot of celebrities will often have asymmetry in their faces because one photo I always like to show is Oprah. She has quite a distinct left and right side because obviously, you know, you see her on the camera, like on the TV, and she has to be a certain way. She has to be very open and like, you know, create that space so people want to talk to her and share. But then in her private life, like she might be actually a lot more introverted or a little bit different. And so it shows in your face as well. So when one part of your face is a lot more active, then, you know, you'll kind of reflect where you're more dominant. And also like a good way to look at asymmetry is at the corners of your eyes and nose. So is that where you're noticing it, or are you actually feeling like it's not moving as much?
Mostly like you can see, this is my left side, which is really interesting you said that because I just told you that I'm actually more introverted, but not. So it like goes down. It's like, and this side does seem like weaker almost. Like it's like a little bit weaker and then the lip goes down on this side.
Yeah. So it's also, I mean, there's different layers, so it always helps to ask questions, but the left and right also reflect like your relationship with your mother and your father, like whatever is happening ancestrally there. But in terms of like the corners of the eyes, like I was saying, so if they're a little bit more like not as uplifted on the left side, then maybe like internally, maybe not as optimistic as how most people will see you or like how you will present, like maybe like you're saying, a bit more introverted, a lot more like thoughtful, like you kind of reflect a lot. So that's kind of like what it will reflect. Generally, having more symmetry is ideal for health because it just represents that you feel comfortable publicly and personally, but it's also okay, like especially if you have kind of more public work, that you can't always be who you are.
Yeah. And so the mother and the father, is one side related to the mother, one side related to the father?
So the yin side, which is the left side, is more mother. And then
yin
the
is
right
left.
side,
Okay.
is more masculine and father.
Interesting.
So when one side's more active, like sometimes, you know, it can reflect like the relationships people have with their parents.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you're amazing. I'm so excited to learn this stuff.
Actually, I had a really good time doing it with you.
Yeah. All right. Well, Stephanie, I really want to take a class with you about this someday. Tell everybody like what you have coming up. I think you taught a class recently, but do you have any other ones coming up? And then your social media where everybody can find you.
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram. My personal one's at stephlair.love. And then my website is theumacollective.com. And in the fall, so around September, I'll be doing like a 6-week face reading course, more specifically for healers and therapists who want to, you know, apply some of this into their work.
Awesome. I want to do that.
Yeah.
That would be great. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I'm sure everyone learned a lot because I know I did, and I want to research more and learn as much as I can now about face reading. So thank you so much for all of the great information.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to leave a review. In that review, I would love to hear what topics you'd like to see covered next and which guests you'd love to hear from in future episodes. You can connect with me on Instagram at Original Being Podcast, and be sure to follow, like, and share the podcast on all platforms to help spread the word. Thanks for listening.